What's going on, everyone? Welcome to this, the 61st edition of the Superstream. My name is Derek. Today is Friday the 13th, October 13th, 2023, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about the wild geopolitical events of this past week. Primarily the attack by Hamas in Israel on October 7th, which has led to basically a full-scale war breaking out. And all of this, as always, by the numbers. Now, there's been a few things that I've been talking about on this channel this year. Mainly 9/11, Las Vegas, Nevada, and this date, October 9th, the anniversary of Yale University, home of the Skull and Bone Society. And it's appropriate that this Superstream lines up with number 61. Skull and Crossbones equals 61 in Pythagorean Gematria. And we'll be focusing on how the Skull and Bones riddle is permeated through the war in Israel between them and Hamas. So in this video, we're going to be explaining the incredible numerology of Yale University and how this connects to the war. Another thing we're going to be looking at is the Chicago Marathon, as Kelvin Kiptum, another Kenyan, broke the world record on the anniversary of the Chicago fire. We'll talk about how that even lines up with this ongoing Skull and Bones code. On Monday, October 9th, Yale's anniversary, the Las Vegas Raiders defeated the Green Bay Packers on Monday Night Football in a game that was synced up with the death of Bray Wyatt. Bray Wyatt, a former WWE superstar. WWE Raw on that same night also had a major Skull and Bones riddle in it. As I predicted, we'll talk about that. And then to close this video out, seems like what a lot of people want to hear about is just some thoughts on a couple of events from the Gematria, quote, community lately. A term which I use kind of loosely. But it seems like my name's been coming up again. There's been lies blatantly being spread about me, so we'll talk a little bit about that. It's not something I really love addressing, but it definitely needs to be in light of everything that's going on. So let's open this up and remind everybody why what I've been talking about all year, the numerology of Yale University, is so significant to the events of this past week. Now, on this channel, we talk about the language of numerology with a strong emphasis on this Gematria code. Gematria, the ancient number lettering system that puts a numerical value behind every letter in the language. And we start with the alphabetic ordinal, where every letter is simply numbered 1 through 26. Yale University is home to the Skull and Bones Society, also known as Order 322, as this is the number that appears on their emblem. In the alphabetic order, Skull and Crossbones has a value of 223. Now, this may appear coincidental at first, but consider that here in the year 2023, Yale University turned 322 years old. This happened on October 9th, just 2 days after the war between Israel and Hamas commenced. In Gematria, there's also another significant method, the reverse cipher, which numbers the alphabet 1 through 26, but with Z as 1, Y as 2, through A as 26. In this reverse cipher, the phrase skull and crossbones sums to 263. Now, both of these numbers, 223 and 263, are prime numbers, divisible only by one end itself, and this is another very important component of numerology that should be understood. 223 is the 48th prime number, whereas 263 is the 56th prime. Well, on April 8th, or 4/8 of next year, on a date with 56 numerology, there will be a total solar eclipse passing over the United States. This total solar eclipse is the first of two Great American total solar eclipses, creating a cross over the United States, much like the bones under the skull create a cross. The number 322 is significant to eclipses. Every eclipse belongs to a certain Saros series, and right now there are 40 active Saros series for solar eclipses. Eclipses from the same Saros happen once every 223 synodic months. And in ancient Hebrew Gematria, the word for the moon, which I believe is Yariach, sums to 223. So one lunar phase, a synodic month, from new moon to new moon is about 29 and a half days. The two Great American Total Solar Eclipses are exactly 82 lunar phases apart from one another. There's also something called a sidereal month, or a lunar orbit, which measures the time it takes the moon to orbit the Earth in relation to the stars. Measuring from the first eclipse to Yale's special 322nd anniversary is exactly 82 sidereal months. Another significant cipher in Gematria is called Sumerian. This is where the alphabetic order is simply multiplied by 6, a significant number of time, the first perfect number. In any of the significant ciphers I use, 82 is the first number to have Gematria of 666, commonly recognized as the number of the beast. Well, Yale's 322nd anniversary falls a span of exactly 6 months before this second total eclipse. But what's so fascinating is that these two great American eclipses are also separated by a span of 6 years, 6 months, 6 weeks, and 6 days. If you convert this to just days, you end up with 2,423 days with the end date included. This brings us to Latin Gematria, also known as Agrippa's Key, formerly labeled as Jewish Gematria on the site, which is part of what I'll be addressing at the end of this video. But in every video, I call this the most significant cipher of the English language. In this method, 6 years, 6 months, 6 weeks, 6 days has a Gematria value of 2423. This is the 360th prime number. Remember, 360 degrees in a circle. And the number 666 is 3 sixes. It's also the 36th triangular number. Add every number 1 through 36, that's your sum. So let's look at the significance of the date of this eclipse, April 8th of 2024. And there's a cool alignment with this date because 2 times 24 gives us a product of 48. This eclipse is in 2024, and Yale's anniversary falls 2,240 days after the first Great American Eclipse, which is interesting because that eclipse falls on the date 21st of August, which equals 224 in reverse Gematria. Now, that alone may not mean so much, but consider that this first eclipse was in 2017. And the date of the second eclipse, 8th of April, sums to 217 in that same cipher. Now, we know reverse Gematria is significant to Yale University, which has a reverse value of 173. The first Great American Eclipse was exactly 173 weeks before the December 2020 eclipse, and the second one was 173 weeks after it. Exactly. 173 weeks is also a span of 1,212 days. Now, on the date of this eclipse, December 14th of 2020, this was a historic day, as the first COVID-19 vaccination approval was made public, and the vaccines began being administered on that date. So we also have 1,212 days from both of the American eclipses to this 2020 eclipse. This eclipse started brown lunation number 1212. Every new moon since January of 23 has been numbered, and this was 1,212. In Sumerian Gematria, total solar eclipse sums to 1212. In Latin Gematria, 1212 equals 3460. And measuring from the first American eclipse to the second is exactly 346 weeks and 0 days. Let's look again at the date of this 2020 middle eclipse. 1214. This eclipse also belonged to solar Saros number 142. A significant number to eclipses is 156, as eclipses always occur 1, 5, or 6 lunar phases apart. The Hebrew word used for eclipse, which is similar to deficiency, used as a deficiency of light, sums to 156, like eclipse the sun in ordinal. 666, triple sixes, plane of the sun, all 156. In Latin Gematria, 156 sums to 1214, and in reverse, it sums to 142, all syncing up with this eclipse. That eclipse was in the year 2020, and in ordinal, total solar eclipse sums to 202, just like skull and bones in reverse. In the reduction method, or Pythagorean gematria, which is dropped down to a single digit, total solar eclipse sums to 67. Yale's 322nd anniversary falls exactly 6 years and 7 weeks after the first eclipse, which is 6 years and 7 months before the second eclipse. Those two eclipses also separated by 33 weeks exactly on the calendar, which is the reduction value of eclipse. So hopefully this demonstrates to you that Yale's anniversary is not at all coincidental. This is entirely engineered by the code of the sun and the moon. So how does the attack on Israel connect to all of this? October 7th of 2023 was a span of 185 days before the second Great American Eclipse. In a cipher called Reverse Caps, which uses the alphabetic order reversed with capitals mixed in with the small letters. Using this method, Hamas has a value of 185. This is a number that I've been talking about for years that connects tragedies in the United States to tragedies in Israel. Consider how World Trade Center equals 185 in ordinal, which was struck at 846, 185. The World Trade Center destruction in 2001 was a modern-day recreation of Solomon's Temple, which sums to 185. And Israel's current president is named Isaac Herzog, whose name also equals 185. The destruction of Solomon's Temple, as well as Herod's Temple, is commemorated on Tisha B'Av on the Jewish calendar, which is the 9th day of the 11th civil month on their calendar. And curiously, in Latin Gematria, or Jewish, the phrase Tisha B'Av sums to 911. And this is very interesting because World Trade Center buildings 1 and 2, as well as 7, were destroyed on the 11th day of the 9th month on the Gregorian calendar, or 9/11, the date of the Al-Qaeda terrorist attack, which equals 911 in Latin. The other date on our calendar that you can write as 9/11 or 11/9 is November 9th, which equals 1109 in this same exact cipher. The attack on Israel fell 33 days before November 9th. Think about how this is a number connected to Masonry, the highest degree, 33, false flag, 33, just like Eclipse or secrecy, Skull and Bones, a secret society. The Twin Towers has gematria of 330, and the World Trade Center was destroyed 33 years after construction first began in 1968. In gematria, the number 33 has an ordinal value of 156 and a Latin sum of 895. Well, not only was November 9th 33 days after this attack, but measuring from November 9th or 11/9 back to the 9/11 attacks is 1,156 weeks, or exactly a span of 8,095 days. Also consider that the 156th prime number is 9/11. But there's even more that connects these dates. 33 has gematria of 156 and 141, numbers that both have ordinal gematria of 226. 11/9 falls exactly 22 years and 60 days after the 9/11 attacks. And remember, the World Trade Center was bombed on the date 2/26 all the way back in 1993. Now, one thing you may notice is that that bombing occurred at 11:18 a.m. In a cipher called capitals added, which is ordinal with 26 letters for, or 26 added for every capital letter, the World Trade Center has gematria of 322. The attack in Israel fell 22 years and 3 weeks after the 9/11 attacks in the United States. It was also 22 months and 3 days after the last total solar eclipse. Now, this graphic is wrong. It's not measuring to the 2020 eclipse, but actually in 2021, there was the most recent total eclipse, 22 months and 3 days later. And again, here we are in the year 2023 when all of this goes down. In the alphabetic order, Yale University sums to 205, which, curiously, is the same value as Israel in Latin, 205. Yale is situated in New Haven, Connecticut. And notice how New Haven has these 9/11 digits, 1019. Well, Ahmed Yassin was assassinated 1019 weeks ago. Who is Ahmed Yassin, you may ask? Yassin was the founder of Hamas, a political organization established way back in 1987. And I thought it was very interesting that Ahmed Yassin was assassinated on March 22nd. That's right. The date on the calendar written 322 or 223. How appropriate now that Hamas has struck Israel 322 years after Yale's anniversary on October 9th. He was also killed in 2004, and when you write out skull and crossbones with an ampersand, you get a sum of 204. The killing of Ahmed Yassin was ordered by former Israeli Prime Minister Ariel Sharon. And what I thought was interesting is that when you measure from Ariel Sharon's birthday, which, by the way, is on 2/26, a number we just talked about, this attack was 223 days after Ariel Sharon's birthday. Israel is getting a lot of support from America, whose President Biden, whose name sums to 322 in square numbers, Biden was 322 days after his birthday for this attack by Hamas in Israel. In a little bit, we're going to talk about how this connects to Resolution 273, which has gematria of 322, as this was the resolution that admitted Israel to the United Nations back in 1949. But first, I want to take a little bit of a closer look at the date that this all started on. October 7th of 2023. Notice how this date had reduced numerology of 15. This stands out because the organization Hamas has gematria of 15 reduced and 150 in standard gematria. Standard gematria similar to Latin, but with the current English 26-letter alphabet used instead. Hamas 15 and 150. The president of Israel, Isaac Herzog, was 15 days after his birthday on this attack. In the alphabetic order, State of Israel sums to 150. This attack fell 150 days after May 11th, which was the date that Israel was admitted into the United Nations back in 49. In Latin Gematria, Islam sums to 150. But with capital letters, Islam has double Gematria of 107. This is a lot like the date that this attack began, October 7th or 10/7. October 7th is the 280th day of the year. And in the reduction cipher of Gematria, Israel sums to 28. 280 is also the Hebrew value of total solar eclipse. And we'll be looking even deeper into eclipse numerology in a little bit as we go. But let's talk about Resolution 273, which again is how Israel got into the United Nations back in 1949. This year's war is happening at the same time as the 1973 Yom Kippur War. And notice how Yom Kippur War has Gematria of 273. Israeli 273 with Fibonacci numbers. The current president of Israel has a nickname, Boogie, that sums to 273. Hamas's attack on Israel was exactly 273 lunar phases after the 9/11 attacks in America. Again, they're calling this Israel's 9/11. The 9/11 attacks in America, meanwhile, were 2,730 weeks after Resolution 273. When Israel was admitted, it was also 19,116 days before 9/11, digits that represent 9/11. That date was also 1,106 weeks after Ariel Sharon was born. And the reason I've been talking about Ariel Sharon so much is not only did he order the assassination of Hamas's founder, but he was the 11th prime minister of Israel. And of course, 11 is a very significant number to 9/11. Isaac Herzog is now the 11th president of Israel. How wild is that? So we talked about 273, but the number 73 on its own is also important to this. You may remember that earlier this year, I actually made this post on July 3rd, after Israel launched its biggest military operation in the West Bank in over 20 years. And this commenced on July 3rd while Joe Biden was at Camp David. And think about how July 3rd is written 37 or 73. The numbers 37 and 73 are both star numbers. The third and fourth star numbers. And of course, the star is the symbol of Israel's flag, the Star of David. Notice how the word Israeli also sums to 37 and 73. This attack on Israel happened 73 days after Tisha B'Av, the holiday connected to 9/11. And this brings us to the Yom Kippur War, which started on October 6th, just one day before this year's war started, and the Yom Kippur War was in the year 73. So that means it's been exactly 50 years since the Yom Kippur War. Well, 50 is a significant number to America. America equals 50, a nation of 50 states. But I want to show you how the number 50 is so coded into these leaders of both organizations. The 50th prime number is 229. This is the capital's value of the name Benjamin Netanyahu. Netanyahu last assumed office on the date 12/29/22, which has the digits 229 or 922 in it twice. On the date of Hamas's attack, Ariel Sharon would have been 34,922 days old. Sharon was born 92 months and 20 days before Mahmoud Abbas, who is the current president of Palestine, president of the PNA and the state of Palestine. And when Abbas became president, Ariel Sharon would have been 922 months and 20 days old. The president of Israel currently, Isaac Herzog, was born on the 22nd of September, or 22/9. And when he took office, it was 902 weeks and 2 days after the assassination of Ahmed Yassin. It was also 2 years and 92 days before the attacks by Hamas in Israel. Hamas's founder was even assassinated 923 days after 9/11. Just one off from having a really good sync with all of this. So let's talk about something else that's interesting about this 229 connection. The 229th verse of Revelation is Revelation 13:18, and this is the verse that reveals the number of the beast to be 666. Isn't it interesting, guys, that the full name of the founder of Hamas happens to have satanic gematria of 1318? Satanic gematria is another significant method, certainly lesser significance, but it's completely built around the number 666. The phrase satanic gematria equals 666 in this cipher. So not only does his name equal 1318 satanic, but it also sums to 1197 in Latin. And 1197 is also the Latin value of 666. The attack even fell on a date with numerology of 60, which of course reduces to 6. 666 equals 60 in gematria. This attack in Israel fell 6 years, 6 weeks, and 6 days after the first Great American Total Solar Eclipse. The founder of Al-Qaeda, who claimed responsibility for the 9/11 attacks, Osama bin Laden, would currently be 66 years and 6 months old. This all connects to the Sun and Moon code, Sun and Moon 666. But one important thing about this is that the deadliest part of this attack from Hamas was at a music festival where terrorists shot and killed a number of people celebrating. Well, that stood out to me because back in 2017, the deadliest mass shooting in American history happened in Las Vegas at a music festival. So not only do we have connections with 9/11, but now we see it with the Las Vegas shooting. Hamas attacked Israel 6 years and 6 days after the Las Vegas shooting. And let's not forget that 66 is a very significant number to skull and bones. Notice the matching gematria, 149 and 41, that 66 has with skull and bones. And if you take 32 times 2 in equation, in their emblem, actually it's 3 times 22, right? 3 times 22 is 66. But it is interesting because 32 times 2 is also 64. And in satanic gematria, skull and bones equals 604. When you write out the number 666, it has Latin gematria of 283, which matches the moon. The phrase total solar eclipse also with this value. When Hamas attacked Israel, it was Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's 283rd day in office. The president of Israel, Isaac Herzog, was in his 823rd day in office. Mahmoud Abbas, who first became a president in Palestine on January 15th, January 15th is 8 months and 23 days before the attack. Meanwhile, Osama bin Laden would have been 823 lunar phases old. These are the same digits in the Gematria of 666 without the and. Remember, the moon is 238,000 miles from the Earth on average. And if you measure from the first Great American Eclipse to this attack, it was 2,238 days later. Hamas's founder was born exactly 1,238 weeks before the current president of Israel, Isaac Herzog. And that's also 8,666 days. So isn't it fascinating that leaders from opposing organizations have such strong numerical alignments? I don't know, guys. It's almost like the theater of war has more definitions than the media would lead on. Again, who benefits from this war? Why would Hamas essentially sacrifice its own peaceful citizens? Because doing this attack, they know what the retaliation is going to be. And it's going to hurt the civilians just as much as it's going to hurt Hamas. So again, geopolitics, very complex. I won't claim to understand it, but when you understand what the media is and how these things pan out on certain dates, you do realize that we are being manipulated on a level that many people don't really understand. Another thing I wanted to touch on is the moon and Saturn, because symbolically this is so significant to Israel. Now, Israel uses a lunisolar calendar, which means every month is an exact lunar phase, and it's roughly based on the solar year. So the moon is very significant, but so is Saturn. Consider how in ancient Semitic culture, one of the father of the gods was El. And this was equivalent to Saturn, the father of the gods. Saturn. So very important in Jewish culture. Osama bin Laden was heavily coated with the moon, by the way. He was born during brown lunation 423. The moon equals 423, so does its what's the word, diameter. Moon and eclipse also have gematria of 57, as the moon has a 57-degree range of declination. Israel's prime minister was born exactly 570 weeks before their president. Osama bin Laden, born in the year 57. And this brings us to the 57th prime number. Now, in one of my most recent videos on Kevin McCarthy being ousted as the Speaker of the House, this had everything to do with the planet Saturn. And as it turns out, this was pointing to something in Israel. U.S. House of Representatives has this 269 gematria, as I pointed out in that video. 269 is the 57th prime number. Osama bin Laden, born 20 years and 69 days after Hamas's founder. The war in Israel began 2,609 weeks exactly after the Yom Kippur War. Israel's president, Boogie, his name equals 269. Also notice George W. Bush's age on the date of the attacks in Israel. I thought this was really interesting. Remember, George W. Bush was a graduate of Skull and Bones, and he was the president during the 9/11 attacks. On 9/11, the only two planes that did not hit the World Trade Center were flight numbers 77 and 93. And look how old George Bush was for the Hamas attack. 77 years and 93 days. In Israel, Judaism is very significant, 77. So is Saturn, which equals 93. 7793 is also the 987th prime number. United States Capitol, 987. The drama there was in Joe Biden's 987th day in office. And then to round this all out, 9377 is the 1160th prime number, an upside down 911. So absolutely, this is connected as well. I almost didn't want to mention this because it's kind of going deep, but this is the type of thing that is going to be aligned every time. Let's dive a little bit deeper into the connections between Ahmed Yassin, Hamas's founder, and Benjamin Netanyahu, the current prime minister of Israel. Notice how the name Ahmed Yassin has gematria of 46, a lot like kill and murder in Hebrew. This connects to Benjamin Bibi Netanyahu, whose full name with his nickname sums to 199, the 46th prime number. When Hamas was founded back in 1987, look how old Benjamin Netanyahu was. Exactly 1,990 weeks, matching his own name in Gematria. On top of that, the founding date had numerology of 109 and 19, just like the last name Netanyahu in ordinal 109. Measuring from the assassination of Ahmed Yassin to the war in Israel is 19 years and 199 days. Hamas attack equals 199. And remember, the number 19 is sacred to Islam, as many claim there is a code of the Quran, similar to the Hebrew Torah, that shows divine mathematical proof that the Quran was authored by a supreme being. Ahmed Yassin also has gematria of 1009 and 1900 in our mathematical ciphers. These are essentially nugget methods, just large number ciphers that occasionally give interesting numbers. And these are very interesting because, of course, Yale University was founded on 1009. And that's what we kicked this video talking all about. Yale University. Yale even ties into Benjamin Netanyahu since October 9th is the 282nd day of the year. The name Benjamin Netanyahu equals 282, and the war in Israel began 282 days after he took office. It was also 822 days after Isaac Herzog became president. And when the founder of Hamas was murdered, it was 23,822 days old. There are a few more things connected to this Eclipse code. Nothing more significant than what I already shared. Some interesting things, though, if you want to check out my post for more. Yassin's full name, as it's written here, this sums to 177 with the S exception. Benjamin Netanyahu and Ariel Sharon both equal 177, just like Eclipse of the Sun and Skull and Bones Society. His name also equals 303, connecting him to Eclipse and Jesus Christ, this whole crucifixion code. So, I don't know. I don't read a whole lot of other numerology blogs, but I didn't see anyone talking about Ahmed Yassin and how wildly connected his numerology is to this event. And I think it's very important to understand the big picture here. All right. So that about covers it for the war. Another thing I talked about on my blog, I didn't want to talk about this in the video because it might not make a whole lot of sense without reading more, but there's a significant riddle with Mel Brooks connected to all of this. And this goes all the way back to one of the first videos I made earlier this year. And this was on the Damar Hamlin case. In this video I made on Damar Hamlin, there was a big part of this where I talked about the War of 1812 and the Battle of New Orleans. Here you have Randall Cobb and Aaron Rodgers, 18 and 12. They got eliminated on the anniversary of the Battle of New Orleans, which ended the War of 1812. both Randall Cobb and Aaron Rodgers went to the New York Jets after this game. And then Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles on 9/11, which is a big video I made down here, right? Disaster in New York on 9/11, all leading up to this war in Israel. Well, in Latin Gematria, or Jewish, I guess for the sake of this video, we'll call it Jewish, right? Notice how the name Melvin James Brooks has this value of 1812. And what stood out about this is that this is the same as Jewish people, 1812. And now you have the Jewish people under attack in connection to this 1812 riddle that I've been following for years. Mel Brooks released an autobiography in 2021, and it's completely synced up with the Eclipse code and 9/11. So again, if you want to see more on that, check my blog. As always, it's linked down in the description below. I might even do a different video on that. All right, tell you what, I'll do a video on it if something happens to Mel Brooks on that day. And I'm not saying it will, but it's just wild how even this is synced up with November 9th very strongly next year, or this year. All right, guys, quick stretch break for my neck here. Oof. I'm going to pull a muscle one of these days leaning into this microphone when I work. I have to be careful. All right. So on Yale's 322nd anniversary this year, one of the two skull and bones teams of the NFL, the Las Vegas Raiders, played on Monday Night Football and hosted a game in Las Vegas. As I pointed out in the last segment, the attack in Israel was connected to the Las Vegas shooting. And now we get a game in the Skull and Bones City, Las Vegas, Nevada. Now in this game, the Raiders got their first win over the Packers in almost 40 years. But what made this game so interesting is that this was a rematch of one of the most famous Monday Night Football games in history, when Brett Favre led the Packers over the Oakland Raiders at the time in a 41-7 win, which was played one day after Brett Favre's father died. So the skull and bones riddle is extremely apparent here. And I did a blog post on this game a long time ago. I'll link it below if you want. But these two games are heavily connected. Monday Night Football in 2003, Monday Night Football in 2023. Las Vegas, Nevada, where this game was played, sums to 133 in the alphabetic order. This week's football game was played exactly 1,033 weeks after the Monday Night Football game, the Favre's dad game. This is also 237 months. And in the reverse alphabetic order, Brett Lorenzo Favre equals 237. When the Packers entered the game, they had a total of 792 wins. They lost the game, so they still have 792 wins in franchise history. The name Favre sums to 792 in Latin. And about a half hour after the game ended, it was October 10th, which is Brett Favre's birthday. An hour after this game, Brett Favre turned 54 years old. In Latin Gematria, Green Bay equals 540. The game ended on an interception by Raiders cornerback Amik Robertson. I thought I had a picture of here. I think it's in this post, actually. Here's Amik Robertson picking off the final pass. Where the hell is it? I guess I put it in a different post. Whatever. Anyways, Amik Robertson, who sealed the game with an interception, is 19,540 days older than Brett Favre's dad, Irvin. Now, the number 54 is the gematria of Love, who's Green Bay's new quarterback. Love equals 54 and 54. Vegas equals 54. The festival that the Vegas shooting occurred at began 54 days before the 54th anniversary of the JFK assassination. And JFK equals 54. The phrase ritual sacrifice equals the 54th prime number and 154. Well, 154 is the reverse value of Jordan Love. Now, in this game, Jordan Love threw 3 interceptions, and 2 of them went to Robert Spillane, a linebacker for the Raiders. Robert Spillane was born 1,550 weeks and 4 days, or 1,054 days before Jordan Love, whose name equals 154. Now, isn't it interesting that 2 interceptions were by a guy named Robert, whereas the game-ending interception was by a guy named Robertson? In the alphabetic order, Robert equals 78. On the night of this game, Irvin Favre would have been 78 years and 278 days old. 78, the gematria of Favre, Green Bay Packers, and Christian Justice Watson, who would have made the winning touchdown pass, or catch, but instead had it intercepted. And of course, his name is Christian, pointing to the Christianity riddle. But notice how these 2 Packers-Raiders games, the Favre's dad game and this week's game, had a total of 78 points scored if you add all of this together. Skull and Bones, Monday night, Las Vegas and Wisconsin, all with 78 gematria. So does Human Sacrifice, 780. I also want to point out how this is connected to the death of Bray Wyatt, a former WWE champion who died back in August. Bray Wyatt's real name is Wyndham Rotunda, which equals 78. And Bray Wyatt, he played some college football. He played for the Troy Trojans. And notice how Troy and Trojan both equal 78. Jordan Love was 16 for 30 passing in this game. The name Irvin Favre equals 1630. And remember when Brett Favre scorched the Raiders in 2003? Brett Favre was 22 of 30 passing. 223, the big skull and bones number. Speaking of 322, the 2 defenders who picked Jordan Love off in this game, Robert Spillane and Amik Robertson, they were born 30 months and 22 days apart. And this happened again on Yale's 322nd anniversary. Las Vegas, Nevada sums to 223 in Hebrew. And notice how Yale University has matching 205 gematria with Brett Favre's dad, Irvin Ernest Favre, 205. Also, in Latin gematria, Yale equals 426. And after the Packers beat the Raiders in 2003, they unexpectedly made the playoffs and got all the way to the divisional game where they lost to the Eagles because of 4th and 26. And remember, this play happened because a Green Bay secondary, what was his, I think it was a safety. And the guy's name was Bawa Zhu, right? Zhu, like Jew or something. And here, Yale equals 426 in Latin, formerly Jewish gematria. And again, we'll talk about this cipher at the end of this video. The names Irvin and Brett Favre both equal 72, and Irvin died 72 days after Brett Favre's birthday. That birthday of Brett Favre in 2003 occurred during Brown lunation number 999, upside down 666. In standard Gematria, Brett Favre equals 999. His full name equals 294, which is connected to 666, or 603 score 6. And Irvin died 294 days, or 295 with the end date, before Favre's birthday. And the number 295 is interesting because 223, 322, Skull and Bones Society, Skull and Bones, all equal 295. Brett Favre equals 179 in Latin. And this brings us to Mike Sherman, the coach of the Packers at the time, who was 17,900 days old when Brett Favre's dad died. Now, 179 is the 41st prime number, and the Packers scored 41 points in that game in 2003. Skull and Bones 41, so does Green Bay. And this game was also played 41 days before that year's Super Bowl, and Super Bowl equals 41. Irvin Favre died when Brett was 410 months old. Las Vegas equals 41. Now, 41 is the 13th prime number, and now the Packers scored 13 in their second game against Las Vegas. Las Vegas and Skull and Bones both equal 130. And of course, Robert Spillane, the guy who got 2 interceptions for the Raiders, now he wears number 41 for the team. Another interesting fact about this game is that the place kickers for the Packers and the Raiders are actually brothers. That's right. Anders Carlson, the kicker for the Packers, is the brother of Daniel Carlson, the kicker of the Raiders. In the alphabetic order, Carlson brothers equals 187, like Brotherhood of Death, 187. Also, Carlson brothers equals 699. And Yale is in New Haven, which equals 1699. So I mentioned the death of Bray Wyatt, and I want to explain why Monday Night Football was synced up with WWE. Now, on Monday night, we have football games, of course, but we also have Monday Night Raw, hosted by WWE. Now, WWE is headquartered in Stamford, Connecticut, which is about 1 hour's drive from New Haven, where Yale University is located. And the initials of Bray Wyatt, BW 223, like the year he passed away in 2023. Irvin Favre died when Bray Wyatt was 16 years and 30 weeks old. The name Irvin Favre equals 1630, as we pointed out. The number 56 equals 1630. And Irvin Favre died on a date with numerology of 56. But this is really wild. Las Vegas entered this game with 523 franchise victories. 523. Well, that's interesting because when Irvin Favre died, he had a heart attack at 5:23 p.m. Bray Wyatt was born on 5/23, May 23rd. This is the date that leaves 222 days on the calendar. Brett Favre's full name equals 222 ordinal. Now, Favre's full name also has double gematria of 824 in Latin and Fibonacci. Bray Wyatt died on 8/24. Bray's real name, Wyndham, has matching 36 gematria with Bray Wyatt and heart attack. And think about how Bray Wyatt died of a heart attack, just like Brett Favre's father, Irvin, also dead of a heart attack. The name Irvin has double gematria of 36, and Bray Wyatt died at the age of 36 years old. and he still would have been 36 for the Packers game. In fact, he would have been 139 days after his birthday. And in the reverse alphabetic order, Green Bay equals 139. In fact, Bray was born 139 days after Irvin's birthday. Green Bay with the capital G on their helmet, like Freemasonry. Of course, Masonic, also 223. But here's the proof that we needed, that this is all connected. Bray Wyatt's real last name was Rotunda. And if you look up the definition of rotunda, it's essentially a building that has a large dome, a circular ground plan, and covered by a dome. Well, in Las Vegas, about a week before the Packers played the Raiders, a new musical venue called The Sphere opened up. See my video on Sinead O'Connor if you want more information on this. And The Sphere is a giant rotunda. During one of the commercial breaks, ESPN cut away to The Sphere showing the Monday Night Football logo on the outside. The Sphere opened up on the date leaving 93 days in the year, September 29th. And then it had a second show on 9/30, September 30th. Well, Rotunda died 93 days after his birthday. And the name Rotunda equals 93. So does Monday Night Football, the Green Bay Packers, Skull and Crossbones, Brett Lorenzo Favre, and Nevada, all 93 in Gematria. When Irvin Favre died, Wyndham Rotunda was 16 years and 213 days old. 16 and 213 both appear in the Gematria of Wyndham Rotunda. But what's so amazing is that the name Wyndham Rotunda equals 1317. The score of the Packers-Raiders game read 13-17 for a final. So this game absolutely synced up with the WWE. So with that being said, let's take a look at what WWE did on October 9th, Yale's anniversary. Now, back in August, I made this post on the WWE and their episode on October 9th because it's in Omaha, Nebraska. Omaha, Nebraska equals 109 in ordinal. And this was October 9th, or 10-9. Omaha, the home of Warren Buffett. Buffett 109. I made this post, and then a few days later, Jimmy Buffett died, right? And in this post, I talk about why I think Damian Priest might try to cash his Money in the Bank briefcase in. Because it's all synced up to the numbers. Damian 666 and a number of other things. It's a long post. Well, sure enough, Damian Priest tried to cash in his Money in the Bank briefcase. And I don't know if he's tried this before, but consider this another example of a prediction that was essentially true. Now, there's a catch here because he was going to cash in his briefcase, but he was stopped by Drew McIntyre. And in an awkward scene, Drew McIntyre stopped Dominic Mysterio from delivering the briefcase. You know, normally the briefcase holder has the briefcase with him all the time. So this was an unusual situation. The current WWE World Heavyweight Champion is Seth Rollins. And Seth Rollins is known as the Monday Night Messiah. Or was anyway. Well, the name Seth Rollins is a super match with Jesus Christ. Jesus died to save our souls, and Rollins would have lost his championship. However, he was saved by Drew McIntyre. And notice how Drew McIntyre was born 985 days after Damian Priest, who has the briefcase. In Latin Gematria, Jesus equals 985. Priest's real name is Luis Martinez, and this is a super match with Drew McIntyre. But look at Drew McIntyre's age on the date of this episode. 14,004 days old, or 2,000 weeks and 4 days old. These are numbers found in his stage name and his real full name, Andrew McLean Galloway IV. 1440, 1440, 240. Skull and Crossbones 204 with the ampersand. The man he stopped from delivering the briefcase, Dominic Mysterio. Dominic Mysterio was 187 days after his birthday. Brotherhood of Death 187, just like total solar eclipse, or total eclipse. Now in Latin, total eclipse is 463. Drew McIntyre was 460 months and 3 days old. And this is important because in my first post on this from August, I pointed out how there was an eclipse riddle connecting Seth Rollins to Damian Priest. Solar eclipse equals 134. Rollins was born 1,340 days after Damian Priest and was 134 days after his birthday for this episode. An eclipse is significant to Jesus because when he was crucified, darkness fell over the sky, even though there was no solar eclipse that day. And just look at how well Money in the Bank syncs up with eclipse and total solar eclipse. Solar eclipse equals 433 in Latin. Drew McIntyre and Dominic Mysterio, the two guys who wrestled over the briefcase, they were born 43 weeks and 3 days apart on the calendar. This is also 303 days connecting to crucifixion of Jesus Christ, just like Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And while Drew McIntyre was ripping the briefcase away from Dominic Mysterio and ending the segment, over in Las Vegas, you had Amik Robertson ripping the ball away from Christian Watson. And yes, this is connected. Christian Justice Watson, his name equals 303. Eclipse 33 and 192. Seth Rollins' real name is Colby Lopez. And the name Colby Lopez equals 1110. Well, Dominic Mysterio was born exactly 11 years and 10 months after Drew McIntyre. That's also 142 months, Eclipse Sacrifice 142. But most significantly is that these two guys were born 4,322 days apart. There it is again, the 322 between their birthdays. This is the picture I was looking for earlier, by the way, because 21 intercepted the ball away from number 9 to end the game. This is like 219. And Yale is located in New Haven, Connecticut, which equals 219. Speaking of Skull and Bones, how funny is it that we got this, we had this huge marathon world record broken just this past week. And we need to look at this guy, Kelvin Kiptum. Now, to me, this suggests that what we're looking at in numerology is certainly just as organic as it can be planned. When we think of Skull and Bones, is it just me, or do marathon runners kind of remind you of Skull and Bones? Because these guys are so skinny. They have like, what, 4% body fat or something. These are basically living skulls and bones. And I don't mean that in a mean way. You'll understand why. This guy, Kelvin Kiptum, broke the world marathon record at the Chicago Marathon. And this all happened just a few days after the death of Dick Butkus, which was huge for the city of Chicago. Chicago equals 46, and this was 46 years after the beginning of the Chicago Marathon. Marathon world record equals 108. And in my video on Dick Butkus, I talked a lot about the Chicago Cubs, who took 108 years to win the World Series. The tallest building in Chicago is 108 stories. And this marathon world record was broken on October 8th, or 10/8. And in the history of Chicago, 10/8 is the date of the Great Chicago Fire. The name Kelvin Kiptum, who broke the record, has Gematria of 163. This is the 38th prime number, and the word fire equals 38. Republic of Kenya, also 163. So measuring from the start of the Great Chicago Fire to the marathon world record is 152 years, and in reverse caps, marathon equals 152. The previous world record holder was Eliud Kipchoge, whose last name sums to 152. Eliud Kipchoge 125, the same digits. Marathon 251, the same digits. Also, if you measure from the Battle of Marathon to the date of the race, you even get 2,512 years, which are the same digits found here. Also, Kelvin Kiptum was 310 days after his birthday when he broke the marathon world record. And the word marathon equals 310. So this happened it didn't happen on October 9th, but it's still 322 years after Yale. And all you need to do is include the end date. And we see this record was broken 322 years after Yale. Notice how Battle of Marathon has that 1009 like Yale's anniversary. Battle of Marathon also sums to 171. Yale University was founded in the year 1701, and now it's 322 years old. Battle of Marathon 223. The Battle of Marathon also 282, syncing up with October 9th. Now, what's so interesting is that the word moon, which sums to 223 in Hebrew, also has matching values with the marathon, 51 and 57. And if you use the moon to measure Kelvin Kiptum's age on this date, you get 295 lunar phases. We just talked about this number because 223, 322, Skull and Bones Society, Skull and Bones, all 295. In fact, Kiptum's world record was 1,880 lunar phases exactly after the Chicago Fire. And 188 is Chicago Marathon with capital letters. Also, the Chicago Marathon matches moon. Great Chicago Fire, Marathon, Battle of Marathon, all matching the moon. The moon also 540. The Chicago Marathon, the Great Chicago Fire, all 504, just like Marathon. The guy who ran the first ever marathon, Greek legend Pheidippides, even he has Gematria of 540. Finally, Chicago, Illinois is home to the 312 area code. Chicago, Illinois equals 312. These are the same digits found in the Marathon, Chicago Fire, Great Chicago Fire, Chicago Marathon, and Kelvin Kiptum. So, you know, everything happening here by the numbers. And I want to take a quick look at the history of the marathon world records, because there's more Skull and Bones numerology here that just makes me laugh. Now, you know, ever since 2003, the 205 barrier was broken. And the year 2003 stands out. Let's see, we have New Haven area code is 203, the dialing code for Yale University. And then it went from 204 to 203 to 202 to 201 and now 2 hours. So this was the first time ever that the 201 was broken. And think about all these numbers. Skull and Bones with capital letters. Hang on. Capitals added. Skull and Bones, 201. Skull and Crossbones, 201. Skull and Bones, 202. Yale in the 203 area code. And then Skull Crossbones 204. So it's strange how you have all these same numbers that are significant to Yale with these skinny marathon runners. It's just so strange, isn't it? All right, guys. Now for the part of the video that I'm sure so many of you were waiting for, and I'm sure I'll disappoint some of you, but I want to talk about a couple things here. Definitely for the last segment of this video, I want to address something that came up last week. Because while most of my viewers have come to terms with this, I understand there's still new people cycling in and out of the Gematria community, so to speak, who don't yet all know what's going on. So last week I had multiple people ask me if I was Jewish, which I thought was very strange because, well, I'm not. Eventually someone linked me to this 90-second video that was put out on October 5th. Now, chances are you're familiar with Zachary K. Hubbard, but in case you're not, this is a guy who also teaches Gematria on YouTube and is actually where I was first introduced to the concept of English number lettering systems. And, you know, I was already into numerology and patterns, but this inspired me to build my own calculator and teach the code the way that I was seeing it as well. And Zach Hubbard's blog used to be called Free to Find Truth. And he likes to parade himself around wearing his own merchandise that says things like truth matters, and launched a website called All for Truth and Truth and Truth. But for someone who stamps this word on himself so much, he actually has zero qualms about blatantly lying to his viewers. And we can take a listen here. You'd beg my pardon, we got to sit through a little bit, but we'll get there.
Will be this year. And if you're familiar with Jewish Gematria, take a look at the Chicago Bears record in the regular season, their all-time record in the regular season, and type in Dick Butkus and look at the numerical value in Jewish Gematria, and type in Richard Butkus and look at the numerical value in Jewish Gematria, and then again look at the Bears record. And on my website, it's still called Jewish Gematria, which is the true name of the cipher. Derek, who runs Gematria.com, who is Jewish, changed the name of it to Latin Gematria on his cipher, if you're more familiar with that. But yeah, let's take a look and say, what are the odds?
All right, so I don't know exactly what he's saying here, but I am going to explain all sides of this. And, you know, before I go on, let's be clear, because there's actually two definitions of this word, right? Jewish. The first one being one whose religion is Judaism. And you can definitely cross this off because I do not belong to any religion. And if anything, I'm much, much closer to being a Christian than anything else. The second definition, however, and maybe this is what he's talking about, one of the ancient Hebrews or a descendant of the ancient Hebrews. And since day one, this is something I've mentioned because my mom's father was Jewish. However, he abandoned her mother, or my grandma, before my mom was even born. So those two never even met before my grandpa died in the 80s. So if this is what he's talking about, then, you know, look, I'm the last person to ever play the race card, but isn't bashing someone on the basis of their ethnicity, like, I don't know, isn't that racism? But it can't be, because this is Zach's same exact story on his dad's side. And this is why you can find videos on YouTube saying that his real last name is Greenblatt or something like that, because, again, he has a Jewish grandparent, just like I do. However, the families were abandoned on both sides. And that's my true story. That's what he says. I have no reason not to believe him. So it's like, what's going on here? Is he lying to you guys, or is he a self-hating racist? I don't know. This is all very silly, but I don't think it's a good look. And another thing he likes to do is raise suspicions about me. Okay, there I am. Hey, everybody. Based on the fact that I used to work for GE Healthcare, you know, which is such a big company, and how can I be on their side? And, you know, this tactic is pure bullshit. I live in Milwaukee, where GE is huge, and I ended up there through through attempt to hire service, right? But in Zach's eyes, I guess all 200,000 GE employees, all 6 million American Jews, everyone's in a giant WhatsApp chat, all conspiring together. It's just foolishness. So I guess the whole idea then, in order for me to look legit, would be to get a lower paying job, right? Well, maybe like at a gas station. Well, no, I can't do that, because if you work at a gas station like Dan Barrett, who was another brilliant Gematria teacher, then you'd be a loser, according to Zach. So it sounds to me like he hates anybody who just ever had a real job. I don't understand. It's really odd. But I do want to address why I call it Latin Gematria now as opposed to Jewish. So let's quickly share this, because this is a legit conversation. I can see both sides of it. And all the synchronicity I had today talking about Latin Gematria in relation to the war in Israel, maybe that gives it a little more credence. But before we talk about why it's called Latin Gematria now, first, why was it ever called Jewish Gematria? And through all the sources I could find and some of my friends over on my Discord server, we couldn't really find a reputable source that called the order of this cipher Jewish Gematria. The only website that we could really see that had this listed was Gematrix.org. And got to bring this site back up here. Here we go. And Gematrix.org, it has 3 ciphers here. So here, if I type my name in, we have Simple Gematria, English Gematria, and Hebrew Gematria. And this Hebrew Gematria is used interchangeably with Jewish Gematria. Both of these ciphers on this website are the exact same. Now, this is in reference to the numerical structure of the cipher, not the order the letters appear in. And let me explain why. When it refers to Hebrew or Jewish Gematria, this refers to the standard Hebrew method, which I call a denary, the decimal, or an extended method, with a numerical structure of 1 through 9, 10 through 90, and 100 through 900. And you'll notice this is how the Jewish or Latin Agrippa's key method is structured. 1 through 9, 10 through 90, 100 through 900. However, Gematrix.org only has 3 ciphers on their website, and the cipher they call Jewish Gematria is the only one to use this structure. They also have Simple English or Ordinal, and English Gematria, which I list as Sumerian. However, this cipher is not the only one to use the denary or extended method, because the current 26-letter alphabetic order also has a lot of relevance in Gematria, A through Z, 1 through 26. My work and work of plenty of others, including Zach, throughout the years has shown this, right? So the earliest texts that show us the current Latin cipher as it appears comes from an ancient book called 3 Books of Occult Philosophy by Heinrich Cornelius Agrippa. This dates all the way back to the 16th century. I think it was 1533, if I'm not mistaken, that this is taken from. And in this book, you'll see he lists out a cipher that is perfectly identical to the Latin method I'm using now. There's a couple things worth addressing. First of all, there's 2 I's, and this is easy to explain. This I was changed to a J later on, so you see the J for 600. Also, the U is 200, but you'll notice there's another V. V is 200 and 700. Well, this refers to the vowel V, which was changed to a U. And then you have the V at 700. W, which was HV or a double V at first, was 900. And then 800, there's no English equivalent. So this is exactly the method. And it's very clear that this is based in Latin Gematria. The first 23 letters of the Latin method are identical to the first 23 letters of the classical Latin alphabet. So why has this cipher been assigned the Jewish moniker? And why not English Standard? Why can't that be Jewish? Well, maybe Agrippa was Jewish, right? Well, no, he was a Christian. So I'm not sure where exactly Jewish Gematria comes from. Yes, Jewish Gematria is very much, or I should say Gematria is very much a Jewish practice. But all of these ciphers are Jewish. It's not just this one. So to me, this is a fair debate, but I just wanted to explain why I called it this. Now, I had a choice too between calling it Latin or Agrippa's key. But in the years of research that I've been doing this, I found that this cipher is so damn significant that I wanted to drive home the historical value of this method. So I called it Latin because everyone knows that Latin is a language that's been around for thousands of years. But if you call it Agrippa's key, it sounds a bit more obscure. It doesn't sound quite as significant. So I ended up going with Latin. And, I'll have that debate, whatever. But it's just, I had to look at the historical base and see why it was being referred to as Jewish. Because, look, I was getting complaints for a long time from people saying, like, hey, there's nothing Jewish about this cipher. Why are you being racist? And I'm like, stop it, right? I'm not being racist. It's just the name of a cipher. But when I really dug deep and tried to find the root of it, I couldn't find anything scholastically that supported what I was saying. So I ended up changing it. And occasionally it ruffles some feathers, but whatever. I don't really care. It is what it is. And, I wanted to, when I relaunched the website last year, I wanted to make sure that the names of the ciphers I was using were going to be the names I was using going forward all the time. So, yes, it was inconvenient. I apologize. Look, I didn't ever ask to be in the situation of being the arbiter of Gematria. When I built this calculator, I had some programming knowledge, but not that much. I figured someone else would come along and make something better, but turns out I made a pretty good calculator. No one wanted to bother. So here I am finding myself in this seat. So yeah, just squash the lies, squash the hatred, squash the drama. I have no reason to be against anybody. And, I wouldn't have brought this up. I don't care what Zach does on his channel. If he wants to talk about sports and have people gambling by it, that's fine. But, just let's be all fair with one another, especially when it comes to our backgrounds, come on, man. Stupid stuff. So, yeah, I don't have much more to say on it. Last time I think I brought this up, Zach gave me a call during one of his live streams, and of course I would take another call. Why? I'd like to know why you're lying to people about my religion or my faith. Kind of wrong to do, isn't it? So I don't have much more to say about that. If you guys want more info, there's a video linked down in the bottom of the description where you can see maybe some of the reason he's upset. I don't know. You guys can figure that out on your own, I suppose. But that'll do it for this one. So thanks to everybody for tuning in. Whether you're watching live or archived, all the support is appreciated. There's links down below if you want to make sure these videos keep coming. Again, I relaunched the website last year so I could do this as a profession, and we're pretty much almost at the place where I need to be to allow that to happen. So any support is much, much appreciated. We're going to be doing more educational things for this second year of the business. And yeah, more to come. All right, everyone. That'll do it for this video. Peace, love, God bless. And we'll talk to you next time. See ya.